Hello there, and welcome to another episode on Peter Herman Adventures. It is March 31st, 2021, and there are a bunch of new regulations for the Chilliwack Vedder River that come into effect starting tomorrow, April 1st. So I thought, why not review those regulation changes? A lot of people don't do well with trying to decipher those things in the manuals, so I'll explain it, and hopefully you find it helpful. The Chilliwack, Vedder River are the same river. Traditionally, it's been called the Chilliwack River above the Vedder Crossing Bridge and the Vedder River below the Vedder Crossing Bridge. It's the same river, it just has two different names. Although more and more, everybody just refers to it as the Vedder, and that Chilliwack River name has kind of fallen out of fashion lately. So there are three major regulation changes that have come into effect. The first regulation change is a change in the upper fishing boundary. So under provincial regulations, the upper fishing boundary has been at the confluence of the Chilliwack River and Slesse Creek. And the federal regulations pertaining to salmon fishing have pegged the boundary at the signs 100 meters downstream from the confluence of Slesse Creek and the Chilliwack River. So now the provincial regulations have been amended so that those two fishing boundaries are the same. So from now on, there is no confusion on the matter. The upper fishing boundary is 100 meters downstream from the confluence of the Chilliwack and the Slesse Creek. So the limit hole is off limits. Second regulation change has been the limit on steelhead trout has been increased from 1 per day to 2 per day. And of course that refers to hatchery fish, so only clipped hatchery steelhead can be retained, but they've increased the limit from 1 to 2. And the intent of that regulation change is so that people can continue to fish even after they've caught one hatchery steelhead. The third change has been a closure of the upper part of the Chilliwack River above Tamihi Bridge from April 1st to June 30th. So this is the section that I'm at right now, where I'm in the Allison Pool area, and this is in fact the last day that I'm allowed to fish up here until Canada Day. And that's a new one. So essentially this section of the river is now closing a month sooner than it traditionally has. And the intent of that regulation is to protect wild steelhead that are spawning in this section of river. Personally, I think it's a good idea. This stretch of river is not that busy this time of year. Like you can, I just drove up here and I saw one other car parked above Tamihi Bridge, so really there aren't an awful lot of people fishing up here this time of year anyway, and why not let the spawning fish have their rest and their peace and let them do their thing. So those are the three regulation changes. If you're completely new to fishing this river, there are other regulations that haven't really changed from years past. And so you can think of it as kind of a rolling closure. As the spring season goes on, more and more of the river gets closed down. And so in the month of April, this very upper portion from Tamihi Bridge up closes. At the end of April, the whole river closes from the Vedder Bridge up. And for the month of May, the part below the Vedder Bridge is restricted to fly fishing only. And fly fishing is very narrowly defined in the regulations as basically casting with a weighted line and an artificial fly. So the month of May is fly fishing only, and the river is open to fishing only below the Vedder Crossing Bridge. The month of May is also a little different because the only trout species that you're allowed to retain in the river are hatchery steelhead. So that part confuses people a little bit. Normally you're allowed to keep hatchery rainbows of any size and hatchery steelhead, but during the month of May, the only thing that's open for retention is steelhead. So hatchery rainbows over 50 centimeters in size. And that regulation is in place because at the beginning of May, the hatchery releases all the steelhead smolts that are making their way out to the ocean. And they want to give them 2 months to leave the system and leave the river. And whatever ones are left in the river on Canada Day are fair game. You're allowed to keep them, even though they're just a little trout. At that point, they want the fish gone. They don't want them competing with wild smolts and coho smolts. And so at that point, you're allowed to keep the little rainbows no matter what size they are, as long as they're hatchery clipped. But during May, they want even the clipped ones to have their piece, and so the only thing you're allowed to keep are hatchery steelhead. I keep repeating myself, but it's kind of an important point. You have to release hatchery cutthroat and hatchery rainbows. So basically the only thing you're allowed to keep are whitefish and steelhead. So that about wraps it up. I really don't think these changes are all that huge. There aren't a lot of people that use this upper part of the river during the month of April anyway. Yeah, sure, so it's going to lead to a little bit more crowding on the lower river, but I fished there in April for the last couple of years, and honestly, it hasn't been terribly busy, so I don't think it's going to be a huge impact. The limit change from 1 to 2 fish, well, there's a lot of people are kind of upset about that. They say that it will lead to more crowding, and the leading opinion I've heard is that, well, you've caught your 1 fish, you should go and let other people enjoy the river. But there is the flip side of it. If you've just driven from Richmond or Vancouver to enjoy our beautiful river, and you catch 1 steelhead at dawn, do you really want to go home after an hour of fishing just because you caught that 1 steelhead? I don't know. I think it's a positive change. I really don't think that this was motivated by anything fishing related. I think this change to having a limit of 2 steelhead is mainly motivated by the results of the recent creel survey. So for the last couple of years, the River Guardians have been interviewing a lot of anglers on the river, and they found that a significant portion of people were releasing hatchery steelhead just so they could keep fishing. And so they don't want that to keep happening. They really, for genetic reasons, the biologists, they want every single one of those hatchery steelhead to get caught and taken out of the river. So they're hoping that by increasing the limit to 2, people will not release that first fish just so they can keep fishing for the day. And yeah, I don't know. I think they could have done it better. I think they could have just said, well, if you don't have to go home after you catch your first one. That would have been one way to do it. I don't know. I don't have a set opinion on that. I don't think it's a terrible change. And for most people like myself, well, I'm lucky if I catch 2 hatchery steelhead in a whole season. So whether I'm allowed to retain 1 or 2 in a day really doesn't make any kind of a significant difference to my fishing season. So there you go. I hope you found this video useful. It's surprising how long it takes to explain it all. It's just a few little changes. Anyway, tight lines out there. Good luck fishing. See you next time.